We're all here, 7:01. I'll call the meeting to order. First up this evening, we have a presentation of the Fayville Hall project by Southborough Historical Society. Good evening.
Good evening. I really don't know how this process works, so.
So the process so far, the way it works for every applicant is the application gets submitted, and then the committee sits down to perform an initial review of the application to see if there are any questions that leap out at us when we get back to the applicant with all those questions, so that they can revise, amend, supplement, or just come up with answers as needed. And we then invite the applicant to come back at the subsequent meeting, now that they have an idea of what the committee is looking for, to give a presentation on their project, to help the committee in its decision. If you don't have a formal presentation put together, we can certainly work around that. If that's the case, we can.
I can make a few statements, but we don't have any kind of a formal.
Okay.
Presentation.
Okay.
I mean, I'm sure that you all know that Fayville Hall is a historic building in town and built in 1911. It had been altered so much over the years that very little of it, by the time it came into our possession, remained. It was used for many town uses, veterans, Boy Scouts, fire department. At one time, there was a large brick structure attached to the back end of it, which of course is no longer there, which did house, I guess, the fire equipment, the town band, and then the town used it for various, I think, youth and family services were housed there at one point, and so on. Unfortunately, there are no interior plans extant that of the original layout, so we have no idea what it looked like originally in 1911. And unfortunately, there are also no photographs of the interior. I have searched the photographic collection at the Historical Society and not been able to find any pictures of the interior. We do have some of the exterior, and of course the very famous one of when it was used during the flu epidemic of 1918 as the town kind of hospital out in the field there. There are two historical features that do still exist inside it, and that's about all. And that is the dance floor on the upper floor is still in existence. 85% of it is there. And that's one of the things that we would like to restore. There are a few pieces from the first floor that we're going to try to use to take care of the 15% that's missing. The first floor is not in existence at all. I mean, the original floor, over the years, the town did quite a number on it, but with partitioning, and at one point in the 1930s put down a subflooring and then asbestos tile on top of that, all of which has been removed, by the way. I want to assure you of that. So that's the dance floor, which is pretty much intact, but does need refinishing and some repair. The other historical item that still exists is the staircase, the grand staircase, and it's really quite lovely, but it does need to be refinished. It needs some areas that need to be replaced, and so those are two things that do still exist, historical features. We just think that this building is going to serve a tremendous community purpose. Obviously, for the Historical Society, it's going to be a place that we can move our historical collection and archives for people to do research. It will serve also as an art center. The Southborough Art Council has endorsed it. I think there's a letter I hope you got this packet of materials. There's a letter endorsing it. And they already they're very enthusiastic and want to be able to teach some art and craft classes there, and are pretty sure they have quite a lineup ready and waiting to go. And we also certainly hope that it will be a place for historical programming. The Flag School has been a great place for keeping our collection, but it is not a great place for having big meetings, big presentations. So that upper floor, which is going to be kept wide open, yes, will provide that. And it will also provide a place for people that want to rent it for social events.
It's not going to mess everything up.
And
Okay, all right.
I guess at that point, I would leave it to you to ask us questions.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Mr. Watts. So we, I think committee members will recall going through the application 2 meetings ago, I believe. And this is the application that was amended in response to our comments. It's not terribly different than what we approved, and I think many of our comments still stand, especially with regard to funding under recreation or open space categories. I think one thing that might be helpful is if we turn to the scope of work page. We can, go through sort of item by item and take a look at some things that well, we talked about what things are fundable, what things are not. Yes.
Sorry.
Okay. Yeah. And so we got via email. I think the email itself came in yesterday evening, afternoon or evening. Saw it this morning with revised pricing on the same scope of work. Excuse me.
Scope.
Okay. It's. Make sure I've got the right document in front of me.
There are things in this new one. 580.
584 is the total of the booking.
Okay, I brought it with me.
Let me speak louder. My point was that it's not just pricing, there are new items
Yeah.
that weren't in the original.
You just dig it out.
That's a one copy.
Oh, I think that's the other one. Anyway, yeah. So, starting off the heading, that site improvements required by planning board for parking and safety. First, I think committee members will recall, we had a discussion about the feedback that we had gotten from the Community Preservation Coalition about what's required for funding as a recreation type project. And I think our conclusions from the previous meeting still stand that privately owned property, it's not dedicated to recreation and not fundable as a recreation project. And we'd certainly welcome any discussion on it, but under site improvements required by planning board for parking and safety, I don't see any items here that are actually fundable under recreation or, for that matter, historic. Under the historic, first, if there are any comments on that, please jump in. Don't let me.
I had the same concern.
Yeah, sounds,
I agree.
that sounds accurate.
Yep.
Under the historic restoration and fire safety and the subsequent one, ADA access. I kind of did a deep dive on that over the past couple of days, just to wrap my head around the MGL chapter 44B, the Community Preservation Act, and then the guidance subsequently issued by Mass DOR. And I found something interesting, and I'm going to share it with you. Okay. So section 5, paragraph D2, talks about what can and cannot be funded. So I'm going to read right from it. The Community Preservation Committee shall make recommendations to the legislative body, in our case town meeting, for the acquisition, creation, and preservation of open space, the acquisition, preservation, and rehabilitation and restoration of historic resources, for the acquisition, creation, preservation, rehabilitation, and restoration of land for recreational use. Same for community housing. Same for open space. And here we get to the interesting part. I read right through the interesting part without highlighting. I'm gonna go back. It took a little while to jump out at me too. So with regards to historic preservation, the committee shall make recommendations to the town meeting, in our case, for the acquisition, preservation, rehabilitation is the key, and restoration of historic resources. So 2 sections previous is the definitions section. The definition of rehabilitation is interesting. Rehabilitation, capital improvements for the making of extraordinary repairs to historic resources, also open spaces, lands for recreational use, community housing, including but not limited to improvements to comply with the Americans with Disabilities Act and other federal, state, or local building or access codes, provided that with respect to historic resources, rehabilitation shall comply with the standards for rehabilitation stated in the United States Secretary of the Interior's standards for the treatment of historic properties. So,
Could you repeat that, please? Just the part about shall comply with the.
oh, sure, of course. With respect to historic resources.
Improvements to comply with ADA, et cetera.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so capital improvements or the making of extraordinary repairs to historic resources. I will elide a little bit and get to including but not limited to improvements to comply with the Americans with Disabilities Act and other federal, state, or local building or access codes, provided that with respect to historic resources, rehabilitation shall comply with the standards for rehabilitation stated in the United States Secretary of the Interior's standards for the treatment of historic properties. So just if you're looking into this, after the meeting, I'll give you the actual citation is MGL chapter 44B. And this is coming out of section 2 of 44B, which is the definitions section.
Guidance by the Mass DOR.
This is actual Massachusetts general laws, MGL.
Okay.
Yep. So that's one piece of the puzzle that suggests some of this let's see, probably the new document, and I've already mislaid it. Here we are.
Yeah.
Okay. Some of these may be fundable as rehabilitation work, but the second piece of the puzzle is the Massachusetts Anti-Aid Amendment. This is an amendment to the Commonwealth's Constitution. I'm trying to think of a succinct way of stating it, that the taxpayer money can't be spent for the benefit of a private party. In order to spend taxpayer money, the benefit has to be primarily to the public. It has to be there has to be a public benefit. So these are the sort of the two boundaries within which we have to determine whether these elements are fundable or not.
The third one,
What did I miss?
non-supply,
Oh,
the funds have already been
Yeah.
committed.
so it's not completely clear here because some work has already been done on the project. Work that has already been completed or is under contract to be completed. We can't supplant those funds with CPA funds. It's the non-supplanting clause of the Community Preservation Act. So it's a large and complicated project. It's been underway for some time. We don't have a great sense of what work has been done so far, what work has been paid for, what work is under contract. But the non-supplanting clause is something the DOR takes very seriously. We have to be very, very careful around that. So it strikes me, and I welcome input from the committee on determining and talking about public benefit and how that applies here. Having read through the application, it sounds like many of the activities that are proposed to take place here are some things that people will pay to join in, for the benefit of the society, which make no mistake, I don't want to downplay the how important the society is to Southborough. We just have to be very careful that we are complying with the Community Preservation Act, which is, with the intricacies of the Community Preservation Act, and also that we comply with the anti-ADA.
If I draw a parallel, and I think about the recreation building, we house, obviously recreation there, this will be housing the historical committee. So similar, kind of similar, it's a little different.
It's a society.
Society, the historical society, sorry, what did I say?
Private organization.
Yeah, it's private.
Well, nonprofit, it's a private organization, is the difference.
Okay. And I was gonna go a step further and say, the improvements to the gym upstairs, but that's so we can rent it out or use it for recreational programs, but I guess that's the difference. I think
I have a couple of questions.
Yes, please.
So I agree with everything that you said, and I appreciate the research you did. I dug into some of these things myself. A couple things jump out at me. Just got this, whether it came in last night or it came in today. I haven't really had time to go through and research some of these new items.
Yeah.
To actually see if, it falls within the code. I haven't compared it to the interior standards for rehabilitation. I have questions on the elevator specifically.
Yep.
I can't imagine $100,000 for an elevator includes all costs. So I'm curious if this is left over from work that has already been done on the elevator. I still have questions on the ADA. So one of the things I would suggest, excuse me, I'm sorry, is, from our last meeting, we talked about specifically the elevator, going back in the minutes, that it wasn't an allowable use and it's not historic. The exterior ramp is already contracted, so not historic. So one of the things I think would be helpful to me is if we could take the new application and send it and have the coalition look it over as
So-
well. They're the experts
Yep.
on this that could maybe give us guidance that we, sitting here, it's kind of over and above our zero pay grade, you know, being volunteers.
No, I think that's a fantastic idea, and that's why we have the membership with the coalition. And I will say, you know, the time in recent memory where we worked a lot with the anti-aid amendment was the preservation of the St. Mark's Bell Tower. And we ended up getting an opinion from town council.
Have to do that as well.
And yeah, and this is the anti-aid amendment is a really succinct little body of verbiage with a ton of complexity and case law and all that we simply don't have any hope of wrapping our minds around in time to get a warrant article together. And I think this is something we want to refer to Jay Talman on.
May I
Please.
suggest, I would recommend you first get coalition input and then go to Jay Talman afterwards if you, because the committee may vote independent of the anti-aid based on coalition input, and then you don't need to involve town council.
Yeah, and I would also add to that in speaking with the coalition, we may be able to better refine what questions we need to get answered by Jay, if
Yes.
we go that route.
And I would say one issue that has came up before is that for the, if I may,
Please.
for St. Mark's, there was a preservation restriction in place.
Yep.
Not coming, it was already in place, so. And where a lot of this work is the interior, it is our experience with the library and the townhouse is those are not easy preservation restrictions to get. And we also just heard that most of it, the interior isn't historical at this point. So who's going to, how do you determine the historical preservation restriction on an interior that meets the criteria of the public benefit? And for exterior with the church, it had to be something that was visible. Was that was for also for the PR on 84 Main Street, the library and the townhouse. So these are not new to this project, but those are even on town-owned properties were. And we also had this question on another project that was before us on where the public benefit lies, even with a historic preservation restriction for the public benefit when it's a privately owned. So those are, as you said, very complicated issues. I wouldn't offer any opinion on any of this until you hear from the coalition first.
So,
May I
Please, yes.
ask a question?
please.
I don't want to jump to conclusions about what you think the use of the building would be. But I got the impression that there was an understanding or a belief that all of the events there would be ones that we would ask admission.
We can only go by what's in the application. That was the impression that I got, was that much of it would be.
So there is a possibility that there would be some things that would be admission types events.
Yeah.
In the past, as you recall, or some of you may recall, at the current museum, we had historic reenactments that were free of charge with a request for a donation.
Mhm.
Is that considered admission?
And this is, so these are questions that we're gonna first talk to the Community Preservation Coalition on, about, rather, and then second, I'm feeling increasingly like we're gonna need an opinion from town council on this. It's a difficult question, and I know there's a ton of case law piled on top of this amendment about determining, what is a public benefit. And we we don't have a single attorney on the committee. And, you know, I think it'd be irresponsible of us to try to make that determination without some professional guidance.
I understand.
If I can
I
add
just
just-
want to make it clear
quickly add
that
to
the Historic Society does maintain records from the town that are to the benefit of the town over the long run of providing the history behind lots of things that have happened here in town. So there is this hard to quantify benefit of having this kind of information that is available at no charge to the public by coming to the society.
One thing that I would say, well, first, I meant it when I said that the Historical Society is an important resource for the town of Southborough. I wanted to make sure that that's understood, that is absolutely acknowledged. When we're talking about public benefit, we have to tie public benefit to actual funded items, if that makes sense. So we, you know, not only for a project as a whole, but for the actual, you know, line items, we have to be able to sort of tie that to the public benefit.
Mhm.
And again, I think some professional guidance would be, and Lisa, I'm sorry, you had some questions you wanted to.
No, I just wanted to add, Ben, that if you look at the Mass DOR, that was the one G.
The IGR.
IGR.
Yep.
You know, on page 55, it throughout it, under historic resources, it speaks about the anti-data.
Yeah.
So I
it's-
think it's very important that we certainly, you know, get some guidance on that as well.
And it's
It
because, you
speaks
know,
about the
Anti-aid amendment,
yeah, that's that requires that there be a public benefit to the expenditure of tax dollars. And you know, the anti-aid amendment comes up with historic preservation so often because so much history is privately owned, you know, and so that's where this issue arises.
and the anti-aid amendment is, what is the actual in the general laws?
No, it's the Massachusetts Constitution.
Oh, Massachusetts Constitution.
I wish I could tell you which article number it was of the Constitution, but it's one of them.
Thank you. That would be helpful in looking that up and understanding.
Can I, Matt,
Please.
you were supplied with a copy of the IGR. And on page 24. Because anti-aid amendment is not just the amendment, it's also case law. So DOR has opined in this and given some resources. So, and just so everyone knows, CPA is very complicated, and the relevant pieces that apply to this historic project are scattered throughout this document. They're not all in one lump chunk. And if you so wish, the committee wishes, I could send you the page numbers that you might find some of the relevant issues so that you can do your own research if you haven't had a chance to already, because it is complicated.
It is. I emailed a copy of the IGR to Michael actually when he was first discussing putting the application together, because especially with historical projects, an awful lot sort of comes to bear all at once.
Oh, and so just so everyone is understanding what the IGA is, the committee should knows because we went through it last meeting. The Community Preservation Act is a surcharge on our taxes, therefore it is essentially a tax revenue under the jurisdiction of the Department of Revenue. And every so often they go through and create these
IGRs.
IGRs, I call it IGA, that's something else. The IGR is their official recommendation on how to interpret the law, because when it first came out, you know, after 20 years or more, case law has created new understanding of some of the, what had been originally maybe gray areas. And so this is an official interpretation of how we need to understand the law. So it's, they don't do it lightly. This was 2019,
Yep.
and they haven't updated it since, so. And this is also reviewing all the prior ones. They kept in what was relevant and maybe made some changes to, based on new case law or new understanding.
So,
If
oh,
I
please.
can, just a quick clarifying question on the anti-age amendment. So I was just thinking of previous examples of historic preservation. And I was thinking of the St. Mark's Church and the 84 Main.
Yes.
So is the difference between that and this, in that the public benefit that the town was deriving was that they were receiving preservation restriction? Is that what the public benefit was?
Yes, and the public benefit is available very easily to the public in, we are preserving the facade of each, so it's available not just freely, but without boundary, to the general public. So that part of it was, I recall our former town council, Aldo Cipriano, saying that there's a three-pronged test as a result of some court case in determining whether a project is to the public benefit.
That's in here as well.
Is it okay? And that particular prong struck me as fairly easy to establish on those two cases. But I was thinking about those two as I was going through this.
So, for example, if instead of being used on the dance floor, if this money was being used on reshingling or something like that, or preserving the shingles on the outside, or whatever it could be the exterior, then that would be potential public benefit, whereas the inside would not. So,
I think it would certainly be an easier case to make based on what admittedly a lay person's understanding. And I think that and protected by a preservation restriction to protect that public benefit from perpetuity. Okay, thank you.
But also meeting the other criteria, Secretary of the Interior standards and non-supplanting. And historic, done to a historic preservation standard.
So can I ask another question then?
Please.
Piggybacking on that. So, and again, maybe this is a coalition question, but the projects that you cited hadn't had work done to them yet. Is there a different standard because some work has already taken place? A lot of work has taken place on the
The
side.
area is basically
You know,
completed.
Yeah, so,
This is where we run into the non-supplanting clause. Work that has already been completed, we can't go back and reimburse for it. And in fact, work that has been put under contract. Also, if a contract has been signed with a provider, we can't then go and pay for that contract.
okay. Thank you.
And we,
I'm sorry, I was just gonna say, do you have a file, or do you have a file, or do you have a version of this that kind of like a picture, almost Excel telling us like what's started, what's under contract, what hasn't started?
We don't. That's what I was saying earlier, that it's kind of a complicated project and that, well, first, it's just physically a complicated project. It's a lot of work on this building. And we're now looking at it. Well, I don't know what percentage completion it's at, but let's say midway, or partway through the project, we're looking at it. This is an experience we simply haven't had yet as a committee.
I guess would it be helpful for them to do that for us, to put this into Excel?
I
That can be done.
think it would be very helpful so that we can make sure we're not running afoul of the non-supplanting clause.
We had one more thing to that as well, Ben. So clearly we know some funds have been expended, obviously, for the elevator. I mean, $100,000 for an elevator is just
Yeah.
not feasible. So any of these things in here, I'd like to also know that funds haven't been expended or contracts been expended for those as well. That might be helpful as well.
and
Please.
this is purely, for your help. If you look under the application, number 7, says, what is the total budget for the project? Oh, And somewhere in here, it talks about 1.8 million and $200,000 being spent on this project. That would be part of the complete project. So what you would expect to see, like we saw for the Algonquin project that we had to review for the recreation component, you would expect to see all of that money called out, what it was spent on and what it's earmarked for.
Yeah.
Once you state that that's been earmarked or already spent, for the non-supplanting clause for this committee to do their due diligence, they need to know what the 1.8 million and 200,000 that's already been, as we've been told, allocated or spent. And also putting items out to bid could indicate that you don't put something out to bid if you don't already, if it's not earmarked for funding already in hand. So that is a question that came up under the another project. I forget which one right now, but just it might have, I forget which one, sorry. May not have been historic, but I just think that would be the type of questions. The non-supplanting is also as serious as the other two components of it.
So I want to understand I understood the part about where work has already been done.
Yes.
And where work is contracted.
Yeah.
That's clear to me, but this other area of where it is earmarked or out for bid is also, you want to see that also? Am I understanding that correctly?
I'm just stating the application stated you have spent up 1.8 million.
Mhm.
And what's the total? And we asked for the total budget of the project. 1.8 million
the
and
total budget.
200,000 has already been allocated to the project per your application, plus another 500. So that's 2.5 if I'm doing the math,
Yeah.
2.5 something. So you would
So-
expect to see a budget for 2.5 million and then pulling out.
These, yeah, as
What's
phrased,
left?
like the Algonquin project, that we had the overall budget and it accompanying the application, and the application said, and these are the items that we are requesting CPA funding
Got it.
for.
Yeah.
We were able to confirm that these items, after much analysis, these items, it's not all of them, I think one maybe wasn't, but we figured out what was fundable, and we were able to put together a warrant article that would pass DOR muster. So one last piece of the puzzle is the ability to, going back to the portion of the MGL that I read earlier. The ability to fund this work as rehabilitation is contingent on the overall project being performed in accordance with standards of the Secretary of the Interior. So the within the application, there is a statement that the project is being completed in accordance with the standards of the Secretary of the Interior. This has come up, we've certainly funded historical preservation of other projects here in town, so this has come up before. And we were given assurance on compliance with these standards by a licensed professional. One that jumps to mind is Lynn Spencer Hoyt. She was able to provide us, with the confirmation in her professional opinion that the work was done in accordance with these standards. This is a question we're going to have to ask. I think one of the questions for the CP Community Preservation Coalition is, how do we make that determination? What backup do we need so that we have a level of comfort that these standards have been met, and that would allow this project to be funded as a rehabilitation project.
So if I understand correctly, you're asking, how does the CPC have reassurance that the standards of the Secretary of the Interior have been followed so
Correct.
far.
So, yes, correct. And so I think what we'll do is the community, I should have said this to begin with, the Community Preservation Coalition is an organization devoted to the Community Preservation Act. We have, we pay membership dues each year to the coalition, and they are the experts on the Community Preservation Act. When we run into a tricky spot, these are the folks you turn to for advice. So this is a question that we'll put to the coalition, in the near term here, making a phone call. And that's just, one of the questions that will be asked.
That's a very fair question.
Okay. Yes, please.
You said work that's already been done.
That's what I asked, is
so-
that what you mean?
Not. That would be a question because the project's already started.
Mhm.
I think it's only for the project you're asking for funding for, but the complicated piece of it is because it's a historic project already done. How has any of the work been done? Impact the resource being still a historic resource that we're,
Please restate that.
so I don't want to shortchange that you've done a lot of work already. But if you're not asking for funding for that, it doesn't seem like that would be a criteria, whether that was done historically or not. Was done to the Secretary of the Interior standards would conceptually only apply to the work you're asking for. Because that's,
However,
However-
is any of their work that's been done to date going to challenge their ability to adhere to those guidelines going forward?
to the, just for the project you're
I
asking
think
for
there's
funding.
an added, this is why we will ask the coalition. Yeah, I think there's an added layer of complexity. This is our ability to fund this as rehabilitation work, I think is actually contingent on work that's already been performed, having been performed to the Secretary's standards. Now, again, I'm a layperson in all of this, so that's maybe I'm overstepping there. This is why we need to talk to the coalition in order, in many ways, to be well informed enough to potentially ask for a legal opinion from town council. So we can formulate the right questions. So as
Excuse me, I
Please.
just want to make sure I understand what that's been a little complicated in presenting that point. So the work that is of interest to you from this grant is the work that will be done, and how do you have assurance that that will meet the standards of the Secretary of the Interior?
Correct.
But since work is already partially complete, how do you have assurance that what has been done either does meet the standards of the Secretary of the Interior, or that it would not negatively impact the ability of the future work to meet the standards of the Secretary of the Interior?
I think
Did I state that?
I think you restated that very well, and I'll say, I think Freddie said it before. We haven't faced this set of circumstances before, a project that is, we're sort of coming into it in the middle of a project. This is a new set of circumstances for us. We just haven't seen it before. So we're finding our way through this. We're gonna talk to the experts and get some expert opinions on this before acting. But we want to make sure that you know as much as we do at this point. And I think now, well, first I want to make sure if there are any further questions, comments, or concerns from the committee. And if not, I think going forward, our first step is going to be to talk to the coalition. And get some feedback from them regarding the 3 or 4, real questions that we have. We've asked for the society if you could come up with an overall budget and how this work fits into that budget, so we have an understanding and confidence that we're not supplanting funds. And I think that's where we stand right now.
And like, basically line item status on each item, what's in
Yeah.
progress, what's up for bid, and what's estimated, for each item,
And
status.
one other, there was talk of willingness to put a PR on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it needs to
A
be
PR.
preservation restriction.
And it sounds like
Which-
the application that is the plan.
that is definitely the plan. Our understanding was that, we really shouldn't do it while it was halfway done. Because, we don't want it to, have that. It to be
As
in
the
that
baseline.
state as the baseline for what the preservation restriction is.
So I would just throw out there that, the town purchased a preservation restriction on 84 Main Street
Right.
before work had even begun. So they can be crafted. I'm not saying this is the path you want to take, but it is available to you. They can be crafted in such a way to account for future work.
Right, that one allowed an addition.
Yep.
It allowed buildings on the landscape.
Yep.
I don't want to go into more detail on that, but I would say the complexity here is also, if you're doing interior work, the question will be, will you need a preservation restriction on the interior? And that may be more challenging to accomplish, given the lack of historical resources on the interior. Not that what you're doing isn't historical, but the lack of other historic, is there enough there for a restriction? And can the Community Preservation Act funds be used on interior resources when there isn't a PR? I don't know enough about PRs, but there has to be a certain amount of something that you're protecting. And it has to be a perpetual protection. So, it gets complicated in that way. The exterior is easier, but most of your exterior work has already been completed. And if the elevator is on the interior, that becomes another question. What's the historic resource on the interior that's been protected?
Wait a minute.
So may I,
Go ahead, then
So-
I'll ask my question.
so in terms of I don't know how preservation restrictions on the interior work at all. So I'm, as you said, that's difficult. The two elements that are important in terms of historic preservation that we know of and can document are the meeting room floor on the second floor and the staircase. Those are two elements that have known historic
Mhm.
value and precedent, or we know what they have been, that they have not been damaged beyond repair. So if a preservation restriction on the interior can be crafted in such a way, is it then, I'm just throwing this out as a hypothetical, is it possible to craft one that says the floor of the second floor is restricted historically and the staircase is restricted, and that's the limit of the restriction, or does it have to go beyond that?
I strongly suspect the answer is yes to your question, that it can be structured in that way.
We ran into this at the library. And
Go ahead.
Yeah, please.
so the library needs a historic preservation, and there was an entity. Finding somebody who could hold it was a challenge, and there was an entity that was willing to hold it, but wanted to restrict the interior in some ways, which the library was not in favor of, and which we had not spent Community Preservation Act monies on, the historic front room. fireplace, or I forget what it was. That became a discussion. So all of this, is challenging and finding out first from the coalition, I think is your first step.
How did that work out in terms of?
Well, they're not
There's no
restricting the
restriction.
interior. Well, no, there's going to be a restriction on that building.
Oh, okay.
It's still in the works.
Okay.
But the difference there is also that's a publicly owned building. And the criteria is it's town owned, so that requirement is very different than a private. You don't get the anti-aid amendment for town owned property so much.
Okay, thank you.
You mentioned the elevator when you're talking about the restriction on the interior. Are you implying that because there's going to be an elevator and there wouldn't have been one in 1911, that therefore we've destroyed the historical? I'm just mystified as to
No,
what
I was saying conceptually, the elevator's on the interior.
right.
If you don't get a preservation restriction on the interior, the question is that elevator fundamental?
Oh.
If the historic value is what you can see from the outside on the exterior
Right.
with a preservation restriction, the access to the interior is irrelevant, or I shouldn't say irrelevant. And I want to be clear on, there are many wonderful historic projects, open space projects, recreation projects, and community housing projects that deserve funding, but do not meet the criteria of CPA. Doesn't mean they're not good projects. It just means the criteria is very complicated and legally binding and strict. So
So you actually were saying the opposite of what I had interpreted, that it needed a historic restriction for you to even be considering funding the LCD.
I said that's a question for the coalition.
Yeah.
I'm not saying,
Yeah, okay, thanks.
I'm not saying anything is needed. I'm
Yeah.
saying it
Right.
is an
But that's a
issue to be
possibility.
asked.
That's a possibility. Okay, thank you.
course.
That makes more sense to me now. I was a little confused.
All right, so it sounds like we have a plan going forward. The revised budget information from your end, on our end, we will be contacting Community Preservation Coalition. And potentially, I suspect strongly that we will be seeking an opinion from town council, especially regarding the anti-aid amendment. It's a complicated subject.
On our end to provide a complete budget with how this information of what we're requesting on the grant
How it fits in.
fits into the overall budget.
Yes, and we'll, as was pointed out, we need to know, what things have already been.
Been done,
Yeah.
already been contracted, or already earmarked.
And Lisa brings up a good point. I didn't notice that, and that's a good catch. An elevator typically costs a great deal more than $100,000. So has that been already partially paid for, or partially constructed, or whatever?
Well,
The shaft for the elevator is in place. That is basically it.
the pit and all of that.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yes.
Good.
May I ask one more question?
Oh, please.
Sorry. Per the application, the application used to require 3 quotes on all of the funding. It became evident when we found out that contractors weren't willing to give a quote on something going out to bid because their competition could see that and underbid them. So we pulled out that requirement, but the estimates need to somehow be quantified. So you have an estimate of 100,000. Where did that come from? Who made that estimate? For all of the line items, like,
In previous projects, that's come from like a project architect will put together an estimate of construction costs. That's one place that we've got them, and we've got them in the past.
right, so where is that based on? There were some principles listed in the application, but that was another thing. like if they have given you estimates. But neither of was it the general contractor and a architect listed historical preservation like Lynn Spencer has.
So each of the estimates, you use the word needs to be quantified, needs to have some sort of backup to it. Or is that what you're?
I guess we'd like to know what was the source of the number, I think is a simple way of saying it. Yeah.
Okay.
And I had a much lighter note for your question. It's such a shame what you mentioned, that there's no interior pictures. And so, right, but have you heard or seen, if you're on Facebook, the I Grew Up in Southborough page?
Oh, yeah.
People post some really
Yeah.
fantastic pictures there. You just never know. If you haven't tried that resource, I'm happy to post.
Yeah.
Because you just never know what people have, and a lot of what they post there are, much older pictures, so.
Ask for it, please.
So there was one other thing that I don't know this isn't something that we can actually provide the same way as the total budget and how do you have the assurance that the standards have been followed?
So, with that, I think we need to ask the coalition. What should we be looking for? And then once we have that, then we can get in touch with the society. And let you know. Okay. All right, so I think I think we have a good plan going forward, a path to get through this.
Thank you for coming.
But yeah, thank you very much for coming in this
Thank you
evening.
for listening.
Any questions?
It certainly was enlightening. Thank you.
My mess. Mr. Falcone, good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. Greetings from 21 Boston Road. I think that site visit that day for Freddie and you was pretty enlightening as to what we're facing with that building. I was going to bring a bill for the damage Freddie did to my beam, but
What'd you do?
leaned against the beam and it fell over. That was a great trick I put in there. I figured he'd probably lean on the beam. No, but no, the building is in serious trouble. And it's certainly a viable project, whether it's going to meet your guidelines when we drill down on it, who knows? There's certainly going to be some political opposition to it. I know I'm not a newcomer to this. I did serve 2 terms as selectman in this beloved town 30 some odd years ago. My only intention is to preserve a big part of the downtown history and the scenic vista of the downtown. That building's been there twice as long as I've been on this earth. And I understand from that visit that day, just in conversation, walking around, that you're faced with perhaps more projects than you have funding for.
Yeah.
So I don't think that building's gonna fall down tomorrow. I cross my fingers that it doesn't. Around the corner on Boston Road in the morning at 5:30, I'm looking, make sure the roof is. Yeah. It's not gonna fall down tomorrow, but it definitely needs to be dealt with sooner than later. That all being said, I'm willing to delay my project till next year with some, and I know there's no guarantees in life, but some assurance that I'm gonna put the application in first, or withdraw this application, or leave this application, however you want me to do it. But I wanna start again fresh next year. If that helps your committee, it's not a problem to me to do that. I know there's some other projects. I saw that the town clerk wants to digitalize records. That's important. To me, putting my selectman's hat back on, that's something I would certainly, as a selectman, be in favor of.
Yeah, so regarding the funds available, this year we have somewhere right around $750,000 in total funding available. And the request that we received, this is the first time in the 8 or so years I've been on the committee, which has been the case, but we have more requests than we have funds available. It's absolutely true. You know, we can't commit, you know, funds or commit to making a recommendation for funding for next year. You know, at this point, we're simply not able to do that. Things are complicated by the fact that it's somewhat of an all or nothing kind of deal. Like you can't do 20% of the project. It doesn't work that way. So I think this year would be, you know, very, very difficult actually to fund.
I can kind of read things, you know,
Yeah.
kind of. So it would give me time to explore some more from the state level, which I've been drilling down a little bit on. This is a difficult time of year. It's like my daily routine is like being in a blender on high speed a lot of times. So as things slow down in spring for me, it'll give me a little bit more time. And I think this process has given me what I need to know. And it gives me time to put some political assets in my corner. And also the economic climate. Once we get this building to a point where it's viable, and who's gonna be in there?
Right.
Interest rates have increased a tremendous amount. And they've taken a project like this and increased the cost exponentially. So, at least if I backed off for this year, I'm not looking for any guarantees from you guys saying, oh yeah, you're gonna be first in line, and you know, I'm not looking for that. But I do want to reapply next year.
And we would love to get another application. I will say that also brings us, you know, we always talk about, you know, we funded this, we funded that. We recommend to town meeting that town meeting funds it. So it's just a shorthand way of saying that. We have funded a ton of projects in the past couple of years, and we used up all of our bonding capacity.
Yeah.
We just completely used it up. So with the passage of time, we actually regain a little bit of that.
Yeah.
So the picture may well be different next year.
Yeah.
Financially.
Yeah, okay.
And as you said, the building a foundation politically is, I think, a critical component of
It's huge.
Yeah.
Definitely huge. I don't know what will ever happen to that building if, you know, if I don't do something with it.
Right.
I think the town is better served to deal with me than they would be for somebody that may purchase it if I sold it. I just think that building needs to be preserved. I've been looking at that building for 60 years now. I was a kid. It's a beautiful building.
I'll tell folks who,
It's classic 1800s, late 1800s New England. And we're starting to get a little bit more information, and Leah has been a great help. We're trying to get information to go stateside, see what's available there.
Yeah.
And also what we see in that building, what that building really was when it was built. That big wheel that was downstairs, we're drilling down on that.
yeah, I'm curious to see what that must have been part of the.
It was made in East Liverpool, Ohio.
Okay.
In a foundry there. And they specialized in that type of equipment.
Okay.
Mostly they keep mentioning about the history of that company, that foundry. Patterson Foundry was that they did a lot of clay type foundry equipment. But they did all kinds. It mentions food, agriculture.
Okay.
So it's some type of a process.
Interesting. So for those who weren't at the site visit, it was fascinating to see the inside of the building, and also a little heartbreaking to see the back of the building. The fire that took place in
51.
yeah, caused a lot of spalling, especially up top along the top of the second story of the brick. In the rear wall, as you stand behind the building and look along the wall, it folds outward. And you know, so the numbers that Jimmy presented, the budget that Arthur also presented, now makes sense. It's preserving the building will take somewhat of a heroic effort. because the fire really did a number. It's been sort of patched along since the
And
fifties.
they didn't have the standards back then, and then we talked about that, I mentioned trying to be cute about it, but the building inspector was probably at the bar at White's Corner and signed the form and said, yep, looks good for me. But you look at some of the damage to that building, that would never fly today.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
So
And when I bought it, I had an opinion that we could replace the 5 main beams that run front to back in that building.
Right.
That we could maybe put beams in beside those beams. The engineer, and it wasn't an engineer's opinion, it was a contractor's opinion. That just isn't gonna happen. You saw it. You could take some of those main beams and almost put your fist in.
Yeah, some of the dry.
There's dry rot, there's wet rot, there's powder post beetle damage. It's just the building's gonna disappear eventually. Unfortunately, so I guess I would, just want an idea that we're definitely in the running. If I stayed in this year, I've got a viable project, I believe.
Yeah.
But politically, I'm not sure it's doable.
I think pushing it off for a cycle is I think that's a wise path.
Yeah.
And,
Let me ask you a question. So on the off chance, and again, you never know what you never know, can CPC come forward with an article at a fall town meeting, if there is a fall town meeting?
yes. There's a special town meeting, we can put an
Okay.
article on it.
I just,
But we don't know what's gonna happen with the other project.
correct, we don't know, and so I
Right,
would, I would hate to,
Yeah.
if we're gonna know come March, what's going on, so just again, to kind of leave in the back of your mind, I mean, I greatly appreciate you coming forward and offering this and making our job a heck of a lot easier. So I would just kind of keep in the back of your mind and start moving forward
Yeah.
on maybe looking at, and again, there may not be a fall town meeting, but on the off chance
Yeah,
that
no.
there is, this might be a great.
I'm gonna
opportunity.
make an application to the state for the, I believe I qualify, so possibly qualify for tax credits. Okay. So I'm gonna start that process very soon, in the next day or two. We gotta have a letter of recommendation and we're trying to follow the guidelines. It's just, I'm doing this all on my own, but at some point I'm gonna probably have to bring in some hired guns. Arthur is kind of like a hired gun, but he's more of a construction guy.
Right.
But at some point I gotta start to really expend some money here to get. And I wasn't sure how much I really should do because I wasn't really sure if this was really gonna happen. And now I think I will do a little bit more. I get a nice artist rendition,
Mhm. Yeah.
nice rendering of what it's gonna look like and
Yeah.
go forward from there.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming in tonight.
No problem. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Before you move on,
Yes,
so the committee is new at doing this hybrid meeting, and I was informed that after the during the historical society, there's somebody online that had their hand raised.
oh,
And we
gosh,
didn't stop for that. You wouldn't know that, so
okay,
that's a new process we need to, before we move on, and each time ask Betsy if there's anyone,
Yeah.
if you wish to do so.
Kevin Miller's the one, so would you like me to go with him?
please, yeah,
Okay, sorry about that.
please.
This
You're
will
good.
affect me.
Kevin was at the site walk.
Yeah.
Might be.
He is there, but he is muted. He's
I'm
There you
here. See, hi, thank you for recognizing me, and I would have been happy to wait, but I didn't see where you had public comment listed on the agenda. So I hope you can take a moment.
Oh, please.
I do have a comment about that I hope will be helpful with regard to the Fayville Hall project application. And I was trying to follow the lane that you're attempting to thread between the Burnett Mansion, the St. Mark's Bell Tower, and this particular project in terms of its public utility. And I confess I'm still struggling with that. But I would note, if it's helpful, that under the master plan, the Historical Commission has a series of mandates, phrased as recommendations, but they are clear marching orders about what we're supposed to be doing as a commission. And no fewer than 3 of the 7 of them concern cooperation and work with the Southborough Historical Society. One is an educational component, which we have no venue through which to pursue, but which the Southborough Historical Society is currently building. Another one involves education, educating the residents of the history of Southborough through innovative programming and events in conjunction with the Southborough Historical Society. The commission does not have a venue for that. The Historical Society is building one. And finally, we are mandated to work with the society to preserve, catalog, and digitize historical archives for the benefit of all. And that would include artifacts that come into our possession. We don't have the means to do any of that. The Historical Society is currently building a venue to do exactly that. You know, there were several hundred artifacts recovered during the digging of the St. Mark's Triangle, you know, that park that is now underway. Those artifacts currently reside neatly packed up in a large box in my basement, and they don't belong there. Where they belong, and I hope they will ultimately reside at the Historical Society at the Fayetteville Hall, which incidentally I toured when there was, you know, quite literally a river running through the basement very early on, and which I've had the privilege of touring again recently, and have seen the kind of remarkable work that's been done over there. So you know, again, your historical commission is mandated to work on a series of projects for the benefit of all town residents with the society, and we try to do that. This is why St. Mark's recently donated the cupola from the school annex to the society. This is why just in the last 2 weeks, they were kind enough through sort of my intermediary efforts to donate 2 large display tables that have become surplus from their library, again, to the society. And with the express hope that we'll be able to display some of the artifacts that are currently in my basement, eventually at the new museum, which I understand will, you know, function as a cultural center and an educational foundation. So I hope that input is helpful. The last thing I wanted to say on the subject is that with regard to the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation, by all means consult this Community Preservation Coalition, but I would offer very modestly that your friends and colleagues at the Historical Commission are well acquainted with those standards. And given that the processes that I understand it for CPC applications that involve historical assets involve review by the Historical Commission, I would say, by all means, send it our way. And we'll try to use what expertise we have to give you what I hope would be helpful input. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you very much, Kevin, and that is very helpful. The navigating the anti-aid amendment, as we've said, is a
Thank you.
a complicated process, and every piece helps in determining what the public benefit is. So as you know, we'll file this away as we talk with the coalition and we talk with town council, so you know we can give them every piece of the puzzle to help make this determination. So thank you very much for sharing that with us. Okay. Next up on the agenda. So the initial review of town clerk's application for records preservation. Evening. So the way that our process works is an application is submitted and the committee then goes through and does somewhat of, I mean, obviously publicly, but somewhat of an internal review of the application to come up with questions, requests for additional information and so forth, that we then present to the applicant so that they can gather information or amend or so forth, and come back and give a formal presentation of the project to us. I see that Jim is here tonight. It's a public hearing. You're very welcome here this evening. And that may prove very helpful as questions come up. We can maybe address them directly. Have folks had the opportunity to go through the application? And if so, are there any questions that leap out to you?
I always have questions.
Why don't you start off then?
All right. Hi, Jim. Thanks for coming tonight. One of the things I had asked Trails when they came in was, I know that you've done other projects with restoration or trying to preserve. Is there any way to, does this tie into what you've already done? I guess that's question number one.
It's a continuation of the same type of.
So can we get, kind of like we asked for historical, the society, some type of continuing budget? So I mean, I'm new to the committee. It would be good for me to know, maybe it's a copy of the past applications, but to know what's been spent to date. One of the things that also jumped out to me was on the IGR. I say that right?
Yes.
Learning. This is good. On page 57, the third bullet said funding for cataloging, indexing, scanning, digitizing, transcribing, or otherwise preserving the information content of municipal documents rather than preserving or restoring the physical historical resource itself is not allowed. So again, I'm new at this. I'm going by what the guidelines say. Is this, and you have more experience, is this something we should be asking Stuart to make sure that this qualifies?
In which parts of it qualify? Because my understanding from coalition input is that the project certainly has to be overwhelmingly the preservation of the physical document rather than the preservation of the information on it.
Okay.
My understanding was also that a de minimis portion of the work can be, the example that was given was like scanning a document. If there's a scanning bed right there as the archivist is, you know, taking the paper to put it into a protective cover or the various other tasks that they do. One of the tasks is just to scan the document and then move on.
Mhm.
It's a de minimis part of the overall work, and that is allowable. But and this is almost a shame. You know, I'm gonna go off on a little tangent here. Jim took me on a tour of the basement of the townhouse. And for those who haven't been there, it's like a horror show for historic documents. It's really incredible. There are, there's, and I don't know what the plans were, but an old roll of plans that were sitting on the concrete floor about that far away from a creeping puddle that I picked up and put on a shelf.
Yeah.
And there are boxes upon boxes of century plus old documents that are at imminent risk of danger. That's without exaggeration. And as Freddie was saying, she talked about the various types of open space, historic, community housing, all these projects that are great, wonderful projects that unfortunately don't quite meet CPA standards and can't be funded. We're faced with that here to some degree. A lot of these documents, it would be great if we could just get them scanned.
Yeah.
So preserving at least an image of them, but as we can see from the IGR, that work specifically is not fundable under CPA. Although I understand, Jim, that you went before Board of Selectmen, and they looked favorably on potentially some ARPA funding.
They didn't want to make a decision on it, so to follow back on Lisa's thing, independent of this. There are 10,297 historically significant documents that don't need to be preserved. Either they've been preserved previously or they just don't need conservation. Conservation. I have a separate request in to use ARPA money for that $56,000 to scan those, because I know it can't come through CPC for that. So the select board will support what I went through for last night, but they still have to wait for some other ARPA issues to come down. And if I told them that if they decide not to fund it out of ARPA money, I'm gonna ask for 2/3 of that this year in my budget and 1/3 the following year. So that's just scanning independent of all the stuff here tonight.
I mean, I'll just add that I've been in the pit, as I call it too. And it is a shame. And we as citizens of Southborough should be beside ourselves. I guess I'm gonna try to say it the nice way. That our documents are in such a way and in such an unsafe location. And we are one brainstorm or whatever away from losing the history of this town. So I am very supportive, Jim, of what you're trying to do. I'm just trying to make sure that, again, I'm new at this, so of course I appreciate all the information. I'm just trying to make sure that it fits within, because it seems to be what the request is for is more for an archivist than the actual document. So I don't know, does CPC also cover just the labor portion and not the rest? And I don't know.
So for the preservation of the documents, the labor portion, as well as there are a bunch of materials that get used in the preservation of it. And the one example that jumps to mind, I know there are many more, but the special covers that are put over the documents, there are steps that are taken to deacidify the paper and so forth. All of those things are absolutely fundable. And in fact, here we go. Municipal documents determined by vote of the local historic preservation commission to be significant in the history, et cetera, of a city or town, then community preservation funding is allowable for the acquisition, preservation, rehabilitation, and restoration of the physical document. For example, CPA funding can be used to deacidify the paper, repair tears, remove harmful films and residues, encase the document, protect the Mylar. These expenditures are allowable as restoration or preservation of the historic resource.
And
So
I will note, Ben, that Jim did come before historical and we did make that determination.
yeah, that's right. Fantastic. And so you made the determination that the documents are forget the exact wording, but important to the town's history. And the historical also support the application to CPA and recommend it for.
They did. It was a 4-0-1 vote since I abstained.
Okay.
So, but it was unanimous among the other members.
Great.
So then based on that, is it just the digitization that could potentially be the issue and not the preservation or restoration?
And the question there is, so the digitization, that would be the scanning of the document, can that be integrated into the workflow so that it is a de minimis portion of the overall scope?
It's that the digitization piece of this is going to be done by New England Document Conservation Center at the same time they do the preservation of it. They will do that.
Okay, we have like a concept of like, if they pick up a document, is it a lot of preservation and conservation? The scan is at the very end, or?
Yes, that's the very end. Yeah, some of it involves the acidification, killing the Mike, when you have those, because my wife is no longer allowing me to freeze them in our freezer. She took great offense when I took a turkey out, forgot to put it back in. It was a turkey, but yeah, it's there. If you ever get a chance to go up there to Andover, they are a world-class facility. They do documents, restore documents for the Smithsonian. They're just true craftsmen, and they really do some superb work. And I don't know if some of you have told the story, but some things we've been able to discover, because we have been able to use CPC money to pay part of the archivist time. And we've taken, if you go to a website called 01772history.org, it's something we put together to share these records with the town. And it's not just here's a picture, but it tells a story of it. And it's really cool. And Matt Close from the MTC has been helpful in having us do this. But if you go to that and you dig into it, you see a picture of something, you can see that it's the document actually had been attached, preserved, it's not just like on the document here. But some of the really cool things we found included documents signed by both John Hancock and Sam Adams to Southbrook. And it involves early at the time Hancock was the governor, Adams was the president of the Senate. And it ironically, it involved a resident complaining about being double taxed by Marlboro and Southborough when they split off. And they agreed they were double taxed. And but to me, that the thing I never thought about is they would have governed the Senate before we had our own currency. So they ordered the refund in British pounds and sterling.
Oh, wow.
And it's really cool. And just another thing it's fascinating to learn about some of the stuff that document's in great condition, and it actually didn't need to be preserved, believe it or not. So it's something independent of all this. We're going to get a number of these really cool documents and have them. This fellow in town is a great amateur photographer, Dick Trinfali, has been helping us on this. But we're going to have these printed up and mounted to schools for kids to see. So I go to the schools occasionally, bring in records with 1700s in person. And the kids don't quite understand typewriters and stuff like that.
Yeah.
When they can see it close up. But there's a lot of really cool stuff like that. Like we have the original document that shows, I don't know if you know this, why Southborough split up from Marlboro. You know the reason why? It was too long to drive to church on Sunday.
Yeah.
I swear to God, that's the reason why. And that's why you have all these white steeples all around New England, but to me, the mind boggling. Right? But there's just been a real, in order to accomplish this, we've gone through every single page of the records. And it's really a neat project, but our objective, if we can get this, and we can get the money from the select board or ARPA, our objective is to have all of the historical records available online before the tricentennial.
That's awesome.
And it tells a story. It's not just, hey, here's 10,000 images. What does it mean? How's it tied together? So people can actually make use of it. It's kind of a really cool thing. So
If scanning is part of their process.
Yeah.
It would seem to me that I guess that's a question for the coalition, but that's part of their normal
I was just gonna
process.
say that. I
Yeah.
think, the question has come up now. I think we have a conversation with the coalition in our future. Maybe we should revisit with the coalition, this issue of the scanning.
I would say, of the money we're looking for, the scanning aspect of this is probably $1,000 of the total.
So
That's it. It's
uh,
minimal. In fact, I can
6 or
actually
7%, I think.
I can actually tell you exactly because I had broken out on the estimate I have from the quote. We pull this up here. It is right here. That's a pretty good guess, I think, actually. No, sorry, that's one. Sorry.
Well, Jim pulls it up. Can I just ask one thing? I'll ask you
Jim, is
this
it the
question.
budget? I haven't typed out.
No, it's actually the
So-
document from NDCC, the actual breakdown of
Oh,
the
okay.
records and
Is
stuff
it
like that.
normal to split it into 2 fiscal years? I mean, can you do that, or is that,
Oh, yeah.
would that be 2 separate applications?
It-
That was my last
And in
one.
fact, this is Jim just being exceptionally well organized. Usually the funds are asked for in a lump sum
Okay,
and expended over the course of years, but Jim has put together a true multi-year budget, estimating what will be spent in each year.
so we're doing the article would be for the full $89,000 roughly.
That, yeah,
Okay.
and Jim's just outlining how it will be expended.
Perfect,
Yeah.
okay, I just wasn't sure how that works, so
It-
thank you.
It's $1,250 of the total 12,000 and.
Yes, please.
So it's $1,250. That's
Okay.
that's the
Awesome.
cost.
Thank you, Jen.
Ready?
In your budget, Jim, and thank you for this application as a citizen, but I have also been in the pits. We've been funding town clerk projects. The CPC has, I shouldn't say we, citizens of the town, but the CPC has been recommending to town meeting restoring these documents, starting with Paul Berry, and it was shocking when I first saw it, and it's shocking to hear that it's still the same condition. So,
It just, can I just jump into something? You just caught me to think of something. Yeah, before I started, they had documents that they sent out and were preserved. And honestly, they used a vendor that sort of like the Staples Easy Button. We preserve everything the same way. It's like they have 17 flavors of ice cream built, but no. And not everything needs to be preserved. Just some does, some doesn't, some whatever. And God help us, but when they did this, they scanned everything in a microfilm. They took pictures of microfilm. And I remember reading that you guys objected that the microfilm was stored in the vault, which makes sense. Why would you store it? So microfilm, I remember using that in high school and college, looking at paper, stuff like that. So, well, I said, well, who tested the microfilm to make sure they did it right? Who looked at the images? And I called the vendor in Vermont. They said, hey, we have a microfilm we pay for. There's no reader on. How do I get a reader? Oh, you can bring him to Vermont if you want to look at it. That's what he got. All right. So I got my old days in the FBI, I had a fingerprint loop to look at prints underwater, and he had verified they were done. But I called the guy and said, why are there no splibs on this? Well, splibs are the marks that are put on when you would, when you look at microfilm, you press it, goes one, there's a single splib for one image, a double for the chapters. So all those pictures they took, and didn't want splibs on. So if you had to look at them, you had to manually turn these things. And then I said, all right, well, why did you have digital images? And they said, well, why did you do the splibs? Well, you didn't ask for them. And I said, what's the cost for splibs? Oh, it's free.
Oh.
And I'm just, I want to strangle these folks. And then I said, well, if we went to all that trouble and all that expense, what would the extra cost to have made archivable PDFs? Because that's the standard you want to have for document. An archivable PDF, one of the things that embeds the fonts for the document into it, so that 50 years from now somebody can look at it, even if you don't have the source software, right? That's the standard. And it would have been something like a penny an image. And nobody asked for it because they didn't know any better. And I just, oh man, I'm glad they were in Vermont. I would have been arrested. And, so anyway, my point is, the money that we're going to the select board for is stuff that, frankly, a lot of it, had they asked the right questions and the vendor done the right thing 12, 15 years ago, they wouldn't be asking the money, but it's where we are. So
Yeah, so back to that, on the budget, Jim. As the committee asked for the society, you just referenced a document for I'm sorry. I'm terrible this way again. There was one line item in your application.
14,665.
No, this thing. Yeah, sorry. The
Oh, it's
NEDCC. So that's not reference who that is and where those dollar amounts came from.
Okay, if you look on the budget lines, 7.
I don't
second-
have it, I just have.
No, on the front page, it's still here. Your application,
Oh, on this application itself.
if you get on line 7,
Sorry, I was looking at the budget.
it says from this first one, the second line down, the
Oh, yeah.
14,660.85.
Right,
This one right here?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a quote from them. I have a written quote from them.
so having a quote as part of this or where that number came from.
Exactly.
And you were able to pull out the 1,000 for the
Yeah, that's part of that.
for the
Yeah.
scanning, that would be
Yep, so of that 14,665, 1,250 of that is to scan.
correct, but you have that document.
Yeah, very good, wonderful. Like I said,
It would be helpful
Sure.
because that sort of backup information was part of the,
I'll forward you right now.
yeah, well, it's not for me, I'm just saying,
Okay.
that's the type of, as well as what went into the 89,152, and to Lisa's prior, I think it was Lisa's question. And it's great that you separated out by years, but CPA projects, just for the committee's knowledge, are projects, the whole project. There's not a timeline. They want to see, so you provided the documentation on what the timeline would be, but you're not funding a certain year, you're funding the whole project, right? So that if it's some reason got started later, it's not like, CPA is different than fiscal year budget. It's not used in a year, and once the project's funded, it's until the project is done or the CPC, per the application. That's what I would say.
Just aside those documents in that 14 grand, it includes tax and valuation list from 1771 to 1782,
Yeah, that's,
highway and wood tax list 1773. I don't know what a wood tax list is, to tell you the truth.
sort of like a building tax, I think today woodlots had value. I could be wrong.
It's interesting.
I'm making that up. but-
It's interesting because the tax records are actually better for looking at from who the residents of the town were back in the day. It's because the census, some of the stuff I looked at only listed the males, which is interesting.
Wow.
Yeah.
Lisa, you had a question.
I
Oh,
just-
I'm-
Just to finish it,
Yeah.
what you just listed,
Yeah.
that is normally in the application,
Sure.
the specific documents, and I don't know if that was provided to the historical decide a commission or not, but that's what has to be. That's what has to actually be voted on, the specific, if you read the IGA, what document you're proposing to be restored. And in the past, I think in your last application, Jim, you listed it was birth records or death records or
Yeah.
whatever that sort of stuff you just listed.
Yeah, but I
And
gotta-
how many there are, that sort of information, which I'm sure you have, it's just not here.
That's the stuff we're gonna be, yeah.
I actually do have a follow-up question on that. So so if I'm reading the budget correctly, 14,000 in 1 year and then 3,000 in another year is used for the actual preservation.
Yes,
So the archivist would help determine which documents need to be preserved, presumably, but is there, in terms of summarizing, preparing documents for presentation online, it sounded like if that's the primary focus of the archivist, that could be a problem in terms of historic preservation. Is that true or is that not true?
I would say that's a question for the coalition.
I think it is. In reading through the IGR, they just had it out. Oh, there's, yeah. Funding for cataloging, indexing, scanning, digitizing, transcribing, or otherwise preserving the information content of municipal documents, other than preserving and restoring the physical historic resource itself, is not allowable. Clearly, some of the work that Jeremy or whoever the archivist is will be doing is allowable. Because there's, as Jim has said, not every document needs to be preserved, and they don't all need to be preserved in the same way. So the triaging the documents is absolutely a crucial part of the preservation, I would say. And we would look for
You need
input
to,
from,
you need the coalition to weigh in, because
Yeah,
there's other parts of the
Yep.
IGA that address what's not doing,
right,
making assessments is not allowed.
right. So
Not that-
we need to talk to the coalition to find where that line is drawn. And also, so Lisa has had a question for a while.
Exactly, I just wanted to say to Jim, I don't want you to think that I'm not supportive of what you're doing. I think whether it's through CPC or not through CPC, this is a project that needs to be done. And I'm grateful that you've spearheaded it during your time. Again, I need to make sure that we're abiding by what the rules say, that's all.
thanks, Dan. What's the, just from my understanding and budget wise, what's the timeline for getting a response back from the coalition to be able to address this? So still the time to, if you guys decide not to support this or only support it partially, that I have an opportunity to address this in my budget this year.
We're gonna be trying to move quickly. The phone calls probably take place this coming week.
We will put the request in as
Yeah.
soon as we're done with tonight's meeting, and I know everything that needs to be asked. The request will go in tomorrow. Now it depends on the coalitions.
Yeah.
You have like 2, maybe 3 employees dealing with the whole state and all the committees and doing lobbying and doing
Sure.
programming and helping towns get ready to pass it. So
Right.
there's an awful lot of pressure on their time. And they have always, what I will say is they respond as quickly as possible, and I will let them know, they will know we are in our crunch time for budgeting. And I will also say, town meeting got moved up, we'll be discussing that later, but that puts more crunch, so.
Can I get a copy of that document so I can help you give you Mrs. Things?
And
Of the
I would
the
offer-
IGR,
Yeah.
yes,
That'll help me phrase this back to tell you,
I will offer to tell you what pages different aspects are,
I got it on
because
the back.
it is,
So,
when I say littered throughout, scattered throughout is better than littered, right? Components are throughout the document.
Okay, that'd be great. And that way I can clarify what we're doing here and maybe help you make that decision. From my perspective, even though it's all one project, to make this work this year, the 14.6 is very straightforward. I'm sure that I don't have any concerns about that at all. The question then becomes of the 34,983. How is that? How do we break down the components of what that archivist does? So how much we're comfortable with? And how do I'm gonna pull a number of this down. Let's say that you guys were comfortable with $20,000 of that. How do I come up with the other 9? I need different glasses, I'm seeing over here. That other whatever the number is this year, so. That's why I say if I look at that, I can come up with a matrix and help you guys make a decision.
I thought I could find it really quickly on my phone and forward it to you, but,
I can do it tomorrow.
okay.
In the meantime, when I get back, I'll forward you just to make sure I have my, action items here. For the AEC estimate, I need to forward Lisa the prior applications,
Thank
and
you.
then when I get that IGR, I will work through that.
Can you send that to typically to Ben?
Okay.
I'll send you an email with the people so that then it can get distributed to
I'll send
everyone,
it better to you.
and Betsy and Kristen. I'll send you an email with that,
Oh, sure,
with
that's fine,
everyone's addresses. Because we have a vice chair. And
Okay.
Betsy is our admin who is irreplaceable for keeping things organized.
The question, it said, voters have previously supported the earlier portion. Was that funded through CPC or was that funded some other way?
I'm sorry,
It says here, voters at town meeting have previously supported an earlier portion of the project.
right, that's what Lisa was referring to, that goes back, I've been clerk 15 years, go back like, started like 12, 13 years ago.
Yeah.
Oh,
With
okay.
pieces up that they were done, and it's like, this is some of it was done improperly. It was all,
And after this one, is it like done after this, or is it something like
I
like
feel
10
hopes-
years
I
from
feel-
now?
No, this said, we'll put a fork into it, we're done with this,
Okay.
unless something, well, there are a couple of safes in the basement, in the back that are locked, that nobody's what they're in, maybe, for all I know, Jimmy Hoff is buried. But no, we should, no, we're good to go.
There's nothing in the basement of the recreation building, maybe.
No, and what makes this difficult is the records are kind of spotty because, as Lisa mentioned before, and Ben had about, they've been flooding down the basement in the past.
Yeah.
And it precedes my time, and a lot of, some records of the town in various areas get moldy and had to throw up and all that kind of good stuff. But just independent of all that we talked about tonight, just so nobody gets fingers crossed, independent of all of this, we've been able to use some senior of the tax write-up to help us scan a lot of these things and so forth. But in addition to that, we've taken an awful lot of our paper records and scanned those as well. And we have an area that's probably from the floor up to the top of your laptops and the length of this table that we're gonna be able to throw out this year. That we've been able to scan and get rid of. So that, it's not related to CPC, it's not historical, it's not, the town council's good with it, so, we have a lot, so just, people talk about scanning, we have a lot of balls in the air, but it's not. we're
Can I
trying to keep the regular
also
line.
mention something that I didn't realize is that the town clerk is legally required to be, this is what I knew in the past. If somebody comes in and wants a birth certificate from 17 something, you're required to not only provide it, but the original document has to be stored on site is what we had been told. You can't take it off site. Or has that changed?
No, that's not correct. I'm glad you said that. There's an awful lot of urban legends in the clerk world.
Well, that was from a prior officials. I won't throw anyone under the bus.
No, and I'll let the cat out of the bag here as well. I'm actually gonna ask some of you folks if you wouldn't mind being test candidates for this. I sat down with town council last week, and the days of you coming in and sworn in person are over. So we're gonna test this with DocuSign documents people sign, and if people want to Zoom or through meetings, be able to do it. I haven't told the select board this yet, but yeah, I'm not gonna get struck by lightning and go away. But yeah, there's an awful lot of rules in clerk rule because we've always done it this way. And the number of clerks that still have typewriters in their office and use them, it's, you want to cry, but it's true.
Well, my question was why that came up is if we're storing these documents in the basement, why don't we get them out into a better facility?
That's what I was,
Well,
that's.
Okay.
And that's when I was told you had to have physical access.
No, well, we're doing a little dipsy doodle on the stuff. The intent is that the few things that we have downstairs are all coming up into our vault. And everything else is going downstairs. Your ballots have to be retained a maximum of 22 months, and they're in sealed boxes and containers. So all these things that have historical value will not be stored down there. And where they're stored after that, I'm going to be putting them off-site, probably at Iron Mountain. Yeah, but it's even I had a vendor come in this past week and another come in next week to look at the records of the assessor and the town treasurer as well. And some of them have mold on them and they have all kinds of issues, and I said that. You know, the second half of this is, all right, what if and when you get this fixed, so they'll be coming to you guys someday for this.
Yep.
This year, next year, who knows, but anyway. The other shoe is, what's the town gonna do about this? Does the town choose to convert a room in the basement that you have to squat down so you don't hit your head on the stuff? That's literally what it has to do.
Yep.
And,
How big is it?
Short, I
oh,
mean, get like kids, I'm short, so,
It's short to start with, and then there's ductwork.
yeah,
I mean, yeah, I've got, and
Do we all
I,
have a site visit?
and it is not climate controlled in any way.
No.
So you've got all these amazing documents down there.
Is it like this size or?
no, well, the
It's
basement
just
itself,
it's just short. It's
Come on,
really,
take it
really
out.
short.
Yeah, I'd love
oh,
to.
but I'm dead serious, I recommend people wear a ball cap and you know,
Yeah.
because it's button, there's no
You'll-
sticking
you'll
down,
be
and I cut in the head and all kinds of
You're gonna
stuff.
have to walk hunched over.
But, it's.
The hard hat?
Just about.
And there is a gorgeous, gorgeous safe from the
Oh, yeah.
early 1900s or 1800s. It reminds me of something Butch Cassidy would have blown off. And but it's got to weigh multi-tons and you'll never get it out of it. But it is a gorgeous, heavy safe with 2 sets of doors on it that would look just spectacular someplace. But I don't know, it's too heavy to get up the stairs. I don't know, maybe they built it. When they built it.
Wait, and we don't know what's in it?
No, it has the assessor's records.
Oh, okay.
And, but I think you'd have to take out part of the foundation and crane it out or something. But I mean, I'd be willing to pay for that. It's really cool. But seriously, if anyone would like to take a look, see, come on down. I'd be happy to show you what we have. And,
I recommend it. I just happened to run into Jim and he offered to take me down there, and it was an eye opener.
so,
And in the past, even on the first floor safe was not, when they first started, they didn't even know what was in there pulling this was under a prior town clerk, pulling the documents out. I mean, it was, even upstairs was not a great situation, which is now much better.
when I started Friday, I asked them how they emptied the dehumidifier in the vault.
Oh, that was it. Oh,
And they said, what do you mean? I said, well, the dehumidifier is running. It's not hard piped. And you know, it was a good little way to carry it up. And I couldn't, I was 86 years old. And they said, what do you mean? I said, well, who's been emptying it? So, you empty this thing? So I told people brought one in and the thing was just, I emptied like 3 times that day. So, you know, and we're now on our 3rd dehumidifier. So,
Oh,
is this upstairs?
Yeah.
Yeah. This is not in the basement. This
Yeah.
is upstairs where you would expect
Right.
some good storage capacity
Yeah.
and,
And we just had the fire chief and the facilities in to figure out how to cut a hole in the side of it. That's serious. Because the Barnstable town clerk, when they had their election last year, somebody went in for the wrong combination and didn't believe they did the wrong combination. It's sort of 5:30 in the morning, they muscled the handle and broke the handle off.
Oh, my God.
So they couldn't get in and a locksmith at 8 PM that night was able to drill a steel rod through at the right angle to hit the release lever inside and open it up. But in the meantime, they had to make a Xerox copy of the ballots and people voted on Xerox, they hand counted them all.
Oh my gosh.
So,
Disaster.
yeah, so we're not doing that. So I had the police, I had the fire chief and John Barrett come over, we mapped out an area behind the big scanner, the fodder of the front wall. The push comes to shove, we're gonna have the firemen come over with one of their saws and cut a 3-foot hole through the cinder block.
Oh, my God.
And we're gonna get in and then we'll bring them, we'll make it work. I don't want to have my name in the paper. It's just one of those crazy things, so. But
so
Anyway.
I can attest that the condition there now is greatly, greatly, greatly improved. And it started with having the ability to use CPA funds way back under, whether it wasn't done perfectly at the beginning, it was a start that hadn't been done under.
Yeah.
And that is a great attribute of the value of having Community Preservation Act funding
Yeah.
in town.
Well, thank you for your time.
Jim,
Come on
thank you
by,
so
we'll
much.
be happy to show you. The good, bad, and the ugly.
Thank you. I love to.
We may have a couple of lost people down there, I don't know.
I'll be able to get this figured out for you sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I will let you know whatever I hear as soon as.
And I'll shoot that email right to you. Thanks a lot.
Well,
Thank
I
you.
will send you an email with the addresses and then you can send it to the right people and then we'll make sure everyone here gets a copy.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so closing out projects, finalizing
Wait
forms,
1 second.
and next steps. Where are we at?
I'll tell you where we are. We're going to put it to the next meeting.
Yeah.
That's lovely. Thank you.
That was funny. Okay.
All right.
It's in progress, but
At this time of year, it's too great, and there are a bunch of things that I'm looking forward to taking on in the spring. This is one of them. refining our application process and
Gotcha.
actually getting that into a written document is another one.
I
And I
was-
think this will fit in well with,
Big scheme, recreation, there's some things there. If there's any low hanging fruit before town meeting that can come back, that would help fund a project, that's the first thing I'm looking at.
Yeah.
And completed projects that are just needing to be transferred, but making sure we do it correctly. I've just been informed, instead of having to we have to get all the old warrant articles to see where the money came out of, and I'm working with the town accountant who is going to provide all of the warrant articles, which is going to make Betsy's and my job much easier, what we've been struggling through now. So it's in progress, and we will fast track anything that is, a substantial dollar amount that is ready to come back, that can come back. All right. Thank you.
the next item, review revised draft budget. So we, folks may have seen in their emails, the state match came in. It came in a little bit more than we had budgeted at 21%.
Wow.
I was afraid it was gonna be 15%, so this is not, it's not bad news.
Yeah.
So can I go through this?
Yes,
with you?
please, yep.
So you have the front page of a 2-page document that we looked at last time.
Yep.
The amounts in the sheets that's not here was the fund amounts. That the balance of what we have to spend, and that is not ready for prime time yet, and that is partially based on potential that we were not doing it correctly in the past, and want to be sure we've got everything perfect for this round where we have less funds available than projects. How's that? I want to make, so I did submit this estimated budget for fiscal year 25, and I will tell you, we looked at it last time. And basically, the only thing that changed that I need your input on tonight. So the fiscal year 24 state match, that's what came in November. It came in late. We had done a really good job estimating at 20%. Because when we have to estimate when our town meeting happens, we are way ahead of getting any help from the Department of Revenue. The coalition was just even throwing up their hands, and I did some deep dive on towns taking, some of it is a guesstimate, but what towns were coming up and going to be withdrawing more, what the real estate market is. And we did a good estimate at 20%, and it came in at 21%. Prior to that, town accountant was concerned if we had overestimated it, we had money in an account based on that we'd have to back out. It was, we were ready to do that. We don't have to do it. Here's the challenge. The state match at 21% came in at $4,035 more than what we budgeted. We don't have to necessarily decide that now. We are required to take any adjustments on big sums and then put the 10% aside. Right? It's a requirement. 4,000 is de minimis. We don't have to, but you may wish to, because after you take the 10% aside, right? That's $4,000 that might help a project out or not. And I'm also working with town accountant to make sure we allocate it correctly in the warrant article, that it may not be part of the budget, the adjustment. It might need to be a separate article. I'll be talking with the coalition about that. That's just a financial piece. But the question is, and I think it's worthwhile to make a decision like we did on some other things, is that if we just say every year we're going to take the adjustment, then we don't say, is this de minimis or not? What starts at, is it 10,000? Is it 70,000? We've had years we had to take like a 70,000 adjustment because the match came in way higher. So you can think about that. We don't have to decide right now, but that is a choice, because it's not, if it was $20,000, we need to do, I would say. But at 4,000, we don't have to, but and then the other point is, it would eventually end up will eventually end up in the account. But it won't be the 10% set aside, and it's possible you would be able to fund it this year, use the funds this year. Not positive yet, that's one of the things I have to check. But I think that's the only, last time I told you I changed it to the 3.5% instead of 4%. And I will, all of that, why this is called a, just to be redundant, a rough draft estimate. I mean, like, very rough draft, I don't know. We still need to get some finalization from Brian on what the surcharge is going to look like and what the surcharge last year. So we haven't received all the fiscal year 24, right? So that's a guesstimate what that actually is that we base our next number. So I don't know if that's rolling your eyes. The committee used to roll their eyes on this. I will say you are much more enthusiastic budgeting.
It's true. It's
Really. So thank you. And if, oh, were there any questions? And any questions?
Yeah.
All right.
Next up, peer report. The only thing I have to report is, I was contacted by Kathy Cook a little while before Thanksgiving, asking if I would meet with her, Andrew Dennington, and Andrew Bath. And I met with them at Kathy's office. The discussion was primarily about their desire to increase the community preservation surcharge from 1% to 3%. And they hope to do this as a ballot question in the next election in May.
Yep.
That was no firm plans were made in that direction, but one thing that was very interesting. So Andrew Pfaff, of course, is from Capital Plan.
Advisory.
He may have switched. I mean, he may have used to be on.
He's chair of advisory.
He's chair of advisory.
Okay. He had put together a list of potential or future projects that in his mind would be funded with community preservation dollars. And there were, so some of the stuff on there, you know, as we've said a bunch of times, Community Preservation Act is a strange piece of legislation, complicated, strict. Some of the things simply weren't fundable. But it was interesting that somebody was aware of all these potential projects. I mean, there were things on there that were fundable that I have the list kicking around somewhere on my computer. You know, every year, usually around June, we do some public outreach and have a public forum and notify every board, committee, commission, town department that we are asking folks to tell us what do they have coming down the road so we can do some budgeting, which would be particularly helpful now that we are in the era of more requests and funding, so we could actually attempt to do some budgeting for plan for future projects. We never get this information, but Andrew had a list of, I mean, I'm going to say it was about 30 different projects, of which solidly 50% of it is probably fundable one way or the other under Community Preservation Act.
What is this listing? So this is, people are just saying the town might like these projects, and now
It
we're
was-
looking to say that some of these may or may not be CPC fundable.
It was in the context of here's why we would like to see the surcharge go to 3%, because we have this list of things like
Whose list is it, I guess?
it was. So this is something Andrew put it together himself.
So these are all things that he like.
Yeah, through his vantage point from advisory, that he had not, you know, knowledge that discussions had, maybe preliminary discussions had taken place, that these things may be coming down the road. And I only bring it up because this is the information we beg for every year.
Yeah.
And holy cow, would it be helpful, especially now in this new era where funding is so tight. So I bring it up a tiny bit as a gripe, but also when it comes time for the community, for the public forum, I'll reach out directly to Andrew and say, this is the kind of information we're looking for, and it would be incredibly helpful to us. We're supposed to, under CPA, have a 5-year plan, of what we'll be funding. And we have been unable to do that because no one will tell us what they're thinking about.
Did he give you the list now?
Yeah, I have the list. I have it on the computer, and I can circulate that. I can send it around. It's like I said, not everything was fundable. It's a weird piece of legislation. If you don't spend a lot of time with it, you don't know. But so that was the main topic of discussion.
Have we, or has the CPC taken a position on the 3%
No.
increase previously?
We haven't
or-
talked about it.
Okay, we've
And
We've
I
had
know
a
we haven't
couple of,
since I
yeah,
joined,
like
but prior to me.
super quick discussions. Kathy was at one of our meetings not too long ago where she brought it up a little bit. It was a Zoom meeting. I'll tell you, I gave, I'm just speaking as me, I don't obviously can't speak for the whole committee, but I was expressed the concern that in the current economic climate and without having a wildly popular project driving the bus, I feel like it's a very hard sell to get people to increase their taxes in this way. And without having a big program of public outreach. I think there are some components to get this passed. You have to have a wildly popular project. You have to do a lot of public outreach, so that when it reaches the ballot, people will be sort of excited to do it.
Well, and we need to know the plan for the schools. No, everybody's gonna be gun shy of making any decisions
Absolutely.
until we know what kind of bill we're facing there. I am a
Absolutely.
taxpayer, I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, I need to
think-
hold on.
Is what you said too, Ben. So now you've got people that just show up to vote, that don't tune into town government and suddenly see something on a ballot that they don't know what it
Huh.
is. And they're gonna
Do I
think,
want my taxes to go up or not?
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So I think it's a hard sell for this May.
And I
don't
think
enough
it's,
outreach has been done.
and I think, another downside is once you make the ask and it gets turned down, you create headwinds for the future when you come back asking for the same thing. And I think it's, my personal feeling is it's a risk not worth taking in May. I would like to see the surtax go up to 3%. But I don't know, I think the way to get there is not throwing it on the ballot.
Rushing it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Completely
So-
agree.
That
And
was,
so you don't think this, like the select board hasn't said, we're definitely putting this on the ballot?
well, they have to get a bunch of signatures to make that happen. And one thing that was interesting is they were hoping that CPC would sort of take the reins and lead the effort. And that we would go to, oh gosh, what was the event?
Sorry, no.
No, this was, it was the turkey trot, the gobble wobble. And go out and collect signatures. And
That's the last thing people wanna do.
yeah, so I told them that we haven't had a discussion on this on the committee. We haven't, and much less a vote. So that's something that we certainly should do. Time is really tight right now with all of our regular work that we have to get accomplished. At some point, after the pressure is off, we've submitted the warrant articles. This is another one of the administrative tasks that we need to take on, is we need to have a discussion about 3%. I generally like the idea. What's a plan going forward? How do we get there? And talk about these kind of questions.
I suggest we put it on our next agenda and give us all time to kind of like digest that and look, because I have a lot of thoughts going through my head right now.
I would even suggest, Kristen, that our agendas are gonna be, we're already running to be late here tonight. We're getting to crunch time. We we have applications that still need a substantial amount of work. And we're gonna have to have warrant articles written
Mhm.
in January.
Mhm.
So we're,
Yeah.
so I would almost suggest that we wait until the warrant articles are, maybe town meeting hasn't happened, but the warrant articles are now out of our hands, they're
Mhm.
off to be published or whatever, and then we can start tackling this and some of the other administrative tasks.
I mean, honestly, Ben, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for anybody to get signatures to bring something forward that they haven't talked to CPC about and we haven't given our thoughts on. Is that really what you want, is battling potential battles going on? And Kristen, you bring up a great point with the school. I mean, a lot of people are thinking about that and the impact of that. So not that it's a bad idea, it's just, I think the timing of it is.
Well, and I will agree that I would feel a lot more comfortable going to the town and saying, look at all these applications we received.
Right.
And we can't nearly meet them. I mean, we kind of got there this year, but it's not really, because I think that was the right decision. I appreciate Mr. Falcone, but you've said that every year previously, we've been fine. So now to go ask for more money for applications we haven't even received, it does feel really premature.
Right, and
Yeah.
I really think we need to have some kind of project or a few projects like, the dog park. In combination with something else that people would be excited about, could help sort of drive it on.
Too bad we didn't, it didn't come forward with a point,
Mhm.
it was on the table. I know, but it's
So
just, again.
may I make a comment? Sorry.
I'm good. Thank you.
The last time, when we passed CPA, it was done by a citizens ballot question committee. And I was the president or chair of that committee, which is a requirement under state law. To put a question on the ballot, I believe. I don't know if it's different if a town entity is doing it or not, but we had to fill out, like, it's like a campaign law, right? Because you are campaigning for something on the ballot. We spent over a year doing tons of public outreach. We reached out to every entity, whether it be a town committee, commission, board, or nonprofit that had anything to do with any of the values of the CPA. So all the housing groups, all the historical groups, we did a lot of outreach. We did, I'll call it the dog and pony show. We showed up at all summer nights. We had a table. We showed up at, people doing a hike. We showed up at Heritage Day. We had our own presentations at the community house and the library. And what we said is it was a good thing we didn't know what we didn't know when we started it, because it basically sucked up 6 months of our lives. And then it passed, and people said it wouldn't pass, and I, at that time, wanted 3%, and the other members of the committee said, no, 1% is it. I wish we had gotten the 3%, but who knows if it would have passed. I see greatly mourned the lost revenue that we could have had. But who knows if we would have had any revenue, and when you look back. So I'm just saying, from my perspective, no one's reached out to the Open Space Commission as a commission to come to us.
Good point.
Have they been to historical? Have they been to housing? Have they been to conservation, recreation? You need to build a consensus to get something like this through town.
And one thing I'll say
Yeah.
is, one thing I've learned in my time in town government is the best intentions of trying to move something forward and not taking your time and do it right have always come back to bite me in the butt. So,
Always.
so.
We learned that of the Open Space Commission, because I'll let you know, I wanted to charge forward. And we had Lisa and Mimi Luttrell and some other members, and they were always like, oh, pulled the reins, and it's like, every time we do something too quickly, it
You
hit
miss,
us in the butt.
you miss something in the translation, or you miss a group, or, somebody doesn't understand. So it's always best to take the time and.
Can I was saying Andrew Bath. And it was Jason Miller.
Oh, so you were right with the
It
committee.
was capital planning. My apologies to both Jason and Andrew, and the committee.
Who made the list? Capital
It
planning?
was Jason who made the list. It wasn't Andrew, it was Jason.
So he has an idea of the capital projects.
Yeah,
Okay, because they have analysis going on, so a forecast. Okay, that makes sense then.
And I will say, they, mention was made, there's this belief that community preservation has all of this money out, on projects that just is waiting to be swept back into the pot. And, I assured them that this, that we have our process, we're looking at it, we are identifying projects that will be closed out. And the idea that there are hundreds of thousands of dollars out there, just sitting around and doing nothing, it isn't strictly accurate. And will be, like Freddie said, we're working on it, taking it very seriously, and we will be collecting funds that truly, are hanging out in an account beyond the project.
This might be for the next agenda, but do we know if there's gonna be an article put forward requesting that housing money be automatically moved?
It would have to be put forward by us.
Oh.
So,
This came up last year, and one thing we have learned is that if another town does something, doesn't necessarily mean it's allowable under the act. And if another town does something, doesn't necessarily mean that this town wants to do the same thing, even if it is allowable. When this was being discussed last year, we had good input from the coalition, which we would ask again if a request came forth. But this CPC always gets an application, and the same process we've gone in for everything. That is the same thing for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund transfer in the past when they made an application. And secondly, I was informed, but would definitely double check, there is no sweeping it all forevermore. This year, what's in the account, you can make an application for. Next year, you need another application and another warrant article. There is not a mechanism from here on in forevermore, all that money gets automatically transferred. I could be wrong, but that's what we heard last year, and we would want to double check that again. But that concept, I don't think it would also need the support of this committee. Yeah, but what you could do in a given year, that's also usually based on an application.
Right.
Not a
Good question.
not a warrant article.
Okay, next up, we need to get Kristen authorized to sign payables. Do we have the form for that?
I gave it to you in that.
Oh, that's right, you did.
I'm gonna make a motion.
Please make the motion that's going to be required per the document. As we will also have to supply the minutes. And it doesn't say a motion, but down lower it says. And it'll go to Sean.
on December 6th to. It's that.
Is there a motion for the Southborough Community Preservation Committee to authorize Kristen Kristen Laval there's no motion written here, but
It's not a motion, it's.
we need a motion. in a
Yeah,
second.
let me see what. The language is. That we're signing tonight after you take the vote. It says the Southborough Community Preservation Committee votes to authorize the individuals below to sign invoices. So that should be Benjamin Smith, Kristen Laval, and Frederica Gillespie. You want me to say it?
I'm just gonna make a motion of what you just said.
It does not, it is understood that this provision does not eliminate the responsibility of the other members of the commission. This came from the town clerk. I'm not clear on that language, but so the vote would be that somebody would make a motion to authorize Benjamin Smith, Kristen Laval, and Frederica Gillespie to sign invoices.
Effective. Did you say today?
At a duly, well, the vote will be happening today, so up above it says, you don't have to make that, in the motion.
I make a motion what Freddie just said.
Second.
I'm sorry.
Who was the second?
Grant.
Grant.
Okay. Okay, all those in favor? Passes unanimously.
You need to sign,
Yep,
everyone
we
needs
now
to
need to
sign
sign.
this.
Pass your pen.
While we're signing this, can I just say one thing, Ben?
Yes.
I just wanted to thank Betsy and Freddie. I can't thank you enough. Getting the information so early before the meeting really helped me in going through the applications and gave me time to research it. So kudos to the two of you. That was awesome. It was greatly appreciated.
We will try to do so in the future as well.
It was very helpful.
Do you need both copies signed?
No, one signed and then we'll make a copy.
Okay.
I wanted one as a, up in case somebody.
Souvenir.
So they spell their name.
It's just a flood in the basement.
Oh, could you send it back? I only signed it one place. You gotta sign, everyone, you gotta sign in two places.
I think my signature may be
Mine
mine
was
as
very
well.
messy.
We're just adding Kristen, but
Okay.
There
There we go.
Okay.
No, you can't. There we go. There you go.
Two places. 7% sign twice.
Oh, I see.
and just so you know, I'm not allowed to sign my own invoices, but that's elsewhere written. It doesn't have. to. So. Restrictions.
Oops, sorry, Ben.
I'll grab that. Yep. Has everyone moving on to the next item, everyone had a chance to review the minutes from our last meeting?
Yes.
Yes. And any edits or amendments? Okay. Nope. That being the case, would somebody like to?
I would,
Oh,
it's
yes,
very minor, but
yes.
page 1, under review preliminary draft budget,
Yes.
first paragraph, last line, says the town treasurer.
Oh,
Oh, yeah, look at
good
that.
catch.
And
Did you hear that, Betsy?
Nope. Say it again, please. First page, under review preliminary draft budget,
Yes.
first paragraph, last line.
Yep.
Where it says town treasurer.
Yep.
It should be town treasurer.
Oh. Yeah, I forgot the little R. Thank you.
You're missing a period on page 4.
On page 4, you said?
Yep. The top under additionally. The very end of the second paragraph.
Oh.
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
What page? Don't you do the minutes?
Page 4,
Page 4.
at the end of the second paragraph.
Oh.
With the word property. Good catch.
I'm impressed.
Wait,
Wow.
say it one more time. Why am I not seeing this?
Second paragraph under additionally. The
Yes.
very last line restricts their property. Just need a
There's no
period at the
period.
end.
Okay, got it. Wow, you are eagle eye.
That's great.
What do they say about my groups?
That's awesome.
All right, is there a motion to approve the minutes as amended?
So moved.
And a second,
Okay.
Betsy?
Lisa,
I second. Fred.
All those in favor? Unanimous. Okay. So revised timeline to town meeting. It's gotten shorter.
I recommend 2 meetings in January because we really need to have warrant articles voted on by the end of January. And that means all of these applications that have to come back. And then you'll need another meeting to go through everything and decide what funding they are. So next meeting would be those applications and as well as having to finalize what's available, which we will adjust if more money becomes available or up or down, going right up to warrant articles going up. Right.
So this is our only meeting in December.
Seems unlikely you would do another one in
Yeah,
December.
yeah. So for January, let's see. How about does anyone have availability during the week of the 8th on, his first choice would be Thursday, probably, the 11th?
So do you know your Concom meeting dates?
Yes, the 4th and the 25th. So.
I'll do the 11th.
11th works for me as well.
Me too.
I cannot do 10th.
Yeah, for me as well.
Oh, sorry.
January 11th, is that?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, so the 11th is one.
Okay.
What's the Wednesday after the 25th?
So February.
That's February 1st.
Yeah, so what about, oh boy,
What about the 24th?
I can do the 24th.
That's a Wednesday, but doesn't historical meet on Wednesdays? Then,
So you
Brett, you meet on Wednesdays too, don't
We
you?
haven't scheduled that yet, and we've been kind of switching days, so.
I mean, either that or, well, the 31st. I don't know if that's a possibility
We're
also.
meeting on a Tuesday, so like we've been changing dates recently, so.
What's the 31st?
January 31st
No,
is a
wait.
Wednesday, it's a Wednesday.
I can do the 24th or the 31st.
I also can do both.
Ditto.
Same.
Okay.
Why not?
Let's pencil in for the 24th
Yeah.
then.
Yeah,
Not
we'll-
penciled in, let's schedule it.
Yeah, and then we'll
Schedule.
get back up. and something.
And it did.
Correct, then if
If
there's a
something happens, we
blizzard
can-
or
yeah.
something, can you pencil in the 31st as a,
Makeup, potential makeup.
so
meeting.
you don't
We wouldn't
schedule,
do virtual with the blizzard.
Yeah,
not just no power? I was just saying, who
Or
knows
like,
what else?
who knows, business travel, whatever, I get your point.
Yeah.
Don't have a
So-
quorum, whatever it is.
Yep.
This is the busiest time of the year for CPC, like this is the crunch time and.
I'll write potential makeup meeting.
Yeah,
But that means don't schedule it unless you absolutely have to.
right. Good idea.
And then you will have a nice night to spend with your family if we don't. Right.
We will make
Or
every
friends.
effort to not have.
That sounds like good.
Sometimes it's not a good thing.
You're on record, every effort not to do that.
Okay,
It's hard to schedule out February for me because it's so far out.
yeah,
You hard to schedule?
It is hard to schedule February.
Just because no one knows. Well, I do know I'm going away for February, there's February vacation.
yes.
Right.
What week is that? Is that the 19th?
Usually it's, I think it is.
I know it's hard to schedule, but I really recommend, let's find out what we can't do because Concom meets on some nights.
Yep.
And school vacation is always a no-go.
Yep.
And that even if we don't schedule it, that at least we have an idea because right before town meeting, if our warrant articles aren't,
So I would say, find the time that works for everybody else. I'm not gonna commit, only because my dad's having surgery in February at some point. I don't know.
yeah, I'm not asking for people to commit, but let's know what we
Yeah.
can't do, and if as many people as possible
Yeah.
can say what, we know school vacation week is out, is that correct?
Yeah, the 19th through the 23rd is school vacation week. I'm gonna be gone the 14th to the 23rd.
I'm about 12, 13, 14.
So
So
the 12th, I don't even know the dates.
the 12th is a Monday, so Brett's gonna be gone the 12th to the 14th. I'm the 14th to the 23rd gone.
To the 23rd,
Yeah, the 19th through the 23rd, that
That's
Monday through Friday,
vacation.
that's school vacation.
The 8th?
The 8th, I'm available.
What about Concom?
No, the Concom is the 15th, and I'll be missing that one.
So potentially, and the only reason I'm pushing this, Lisa, is if other people can be
I get it.
dates open.
That's why I'm just saying, decide that you guys, and if it ends up, it works for me, great.
So the 8th is one availability
Thursday.
and Thursday, the 8th, and what's the one after the 23rd at 7? That would be after
The
February.
29th.
Oh, Sadie Hawkins Day.
My birthday.
Oh.
Can't do it that
Can't do it that night.
Are you 12?
Yeah.
Oh my God, how old are you?
I will be 16.
Wow, that's a great age.
So we'll aim for the 8th, and if everyone can leave that open, and that means you may not have a quorum if somebody else can't do it and Lisa turns out not to be able to. Is that all right with you, Lisa? And you could always Zoom if it's not a blizzard in the
It's not a blizzard, yeah.
There's one other thing before, and now I just forgot what it was. Right. And it was an important. Oh. I think we're overdue. We need to, you need to tell Betsy you want her to write up the annual.
Oh, yes, I
Oh.
meant to do that. I didn't have time this week, but I will get that out to everyone.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So is that something you can? Because it was due, and we're not going to wait until January. If she sends it out, you can send your edits to me. It's not deliberation because it's a report of what we've already done, but just to be clean, you can send your comments to Betsy and I, and we will make the edits.
Yeah.
And then resend it to you for final okay to us, and then we'll send it in. Is that?
No, sorry
Perfect.
about that.
And I think you get the opportunity. I don't know when it goes to print, but
Yeah, we've got time.
Okay.
she wanted it by the 5th.
Did you really? Why didn't I get that here?
For the 5th of February,
5th of December.
5th of December. Oh,
I think
Crazy.
she's trying to do her job ahead of time because there's always people like.
Okay, all right, I'll get that done.
And if anyone else is on a committee, you may want to nudge them.
Yeah.
And maybe I've got the wrong date. I think it was December 5th.
all right. Well, with that, would somebody like to make a motion to adjourn?
I make the motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? Unanimous.
Okay. Yeah.
We
I
made it.
don't see you guys. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays, I know.
Something I'm not ready to see.
We just talk about Thanksgiving and then it's ready to adjourn already.
Oh, can you see it when you're?
No, can you post it?
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah.
That black